Hi, everyone. Today is Tuesday, January the 14th. My name is Anne-Marie Band, and this is the Moneyball Morning Report for the Benzinga Pro platform. We're going to start looking at the ES here. Yesterday, I did mention that I thought we would have some sort of bounce event, but as we came into the space, the bounce was very shallow. And the dip was really where the bounce actually gave us some traction. And so that number was around 58.22. I did not think it would get that low, but the lines on the chart certainly did show us that. This morning, we had, actually last night when the futures market opened, we had a gap up, and then we have seen a little bit of a fade as the price action moves ahead. My thought is this: we've got the PPI coming out this morning, and that's probably going to move the market a little bit. Our trend is down, but we are in a support structure event. If we look all the way back to September, we see resistance at this 58.22. It becomes support. It loses that support, collapses down into 57.25, and then bounces straight through all of that information and straight up. And so we are seeing a lot of the volatility that I expect. I still believe we're in a sideways patch, and that sideways patch is got us right in the middle of this noise. So if we cannot break 59.10, my suspicion is we retest 58.20 and then come down to 57.25. What is the formation today? A little bit sideways. You could sell the short. If it breaches this 59.10 easily, it could go to 59.60. 59.58 is the number I have up there. And so you want to use those 1 hour charts particularly to help you with what's going on. We had an NFIB that came out very positive, and that's faded quite a bit. We're now sitting in an area of control. My thought for the trade is if we hold 59.22 on that hourly formation, it will bounce into the 59.10, 59.22, and then 59.60 as the upward trajectory. If per happenstance the shorts take control again, we could collapse off of the lower high into 58.22 again and down into 57.29. Let's take a look at the hourly chart. What I did was frame out the opening range. I've done this for all of the charts, but I only drew the box in the ES. What we're doing here is we bounced in a continuation up into that 59.10. We can see liquidity all the way up to 59.16, and now we are moving down, potentially holding that higher low. My thought is that if we can pull back and hold the value area low, yes, we are at the bottom of the value area low, we should be able to move upward. Notice our Keltner channel does have some upward trajectory, moving a little flat right now, which tells us that easily we could come into a support zone. That support zone could very well be yesterday's closing VWAP ticker at 58.44. So there's a lot of motion potentially here. And what I can do, let's do a Fibonacci going in the other direction. We can see the price action gives us lines very close to liquidity down there at 58.39. Do yourself a favor. When you've got an upward sloping, longer term moving average and a flat VWAP, and a downward sloping tight moving average, an upward to flat Keltner, and a downward momentum, it tells you there's a range in play. So wait for the bottom of the range if you want to go long. Wait for the top of the range if you want to go short. Now, yesterday, we were looking at that same sort of formation, but I felt like there was a critical bounce zone that we needed to hold, and you can see us developing that bounce at 58.22, and it really changes the entire shape of the formation. Notice we begin trading above the VWAP. The tight moving average begins to slope up. The momentum indicator begins to slope up. This tells us that this hold here that breaches shifts us from a sideways formation, old support, that should be resistance. Notice how many times it tested it, right? Back here, relative support comes in at that 58.50. We test it 3 times and then rocket forward. You can see that developing when the momentum really starts to lift and those short moving averages, those tighter time moving averages give us that uplift. And then once we get above the VWAP, that's going to be what we look at. So as it sits sideways, but we could change shape. We want to watch for old resistance at that 59.10 to become support, get retested, forced to move back up into 59.60 if we're looking for further upside motion. For the downside pressure event that still could keep us range bound, that's at that 58.50 for the bounce. Very confusing markets today. You want to be extremely particular about where you choose to enter. All right, taking a look at the NQ, got the same kind of box. Whoops, I don't know where I moved that from, but let's get this bigger. Here's what we're looking at. We've got a break of this range, but we're sitting down at that 20,974 support. That support zone faded right into our number at 20,698. It was absolutely beautiful. Notice the reason we picked it. Resistance, resistance, breakthrough resistance, and then that resistance becomes support. The deep fade likely came from the shorts getting too ahead of themselves and then the buyers just coming in. Notice our momentum indicator is very low. 2 things can happen here. We can have a reflexive bounce, which from a daily perspective, it looks like that might be forming a reflexive bounce, but there's going to be heavy pressure above us, so it could be fairly noisy. Notice, last time we got down into this very low momentum area, we did have a reflexive bounce, but it turned around from that daily perspective and moved all the way down. All right, still making lower highs and lower lows, but we are in a critical area of congestion. If we lose, my thought is, if we lose 20,876, we'll retest 20,698 and then potentially head all the way down to 20,276 and even 20,000. So that's super important for us to stare down. As we go to the intraday chart, staring down the 1 hour chart, you can see that this opening candlestick, the first hour in the pre-market, we have left it. All right, so let's pull this back. Operator error, of course. Always operator error with me. Here we go. Let's pull this up. We are underneath that opening range. We tried to stay above it, but now we are breaking down. So in my mind, here's what we've got. Downward momentum, tight moving average down, underneath the VWAP, underneath the low of the opening range. This tells me that the traders are going to try and press downward on the formation into these lower edges, potentially near that 20,876 zone, which seems like a nice clean support action. So that is likely the target downward. Where will we see buyers? Well, we'll see buyers if we get right back inside of 20,995, because this will be the recapture of this area, and we'll move to the top of the box, 21,088. The 1.618 is 21,138, and then potentially up to 21,170. I legitimately have no idea which way this chart is going to go into, but I do suspect that the deepest dips are going to find buyers, and the highest spikes are going to find sellers, because I believe the market is generally range bound from a very wide time frame. All right, let's take a look at the YM. For the YM on the daily chart, we see lower highs and lower lows. Price action sitting right in the middle of heavy congestion. We broke lower, beautiful test of prior support. These are areas where our eyes should be focused on for buying events. Today, the buying event is very likely to be 41,971. It keeps us well within the range. Could we lose that break and head down to 41,689? Absolutely. So what do you want to do when you get there? wait for it to tell you that they are going to buy. Okay, we had 4 days of sideways action in the past here. Today, we are very close to the close of the prior day. So pullbacks, they're trying to frame out a bottom for sure. Momentum is a little divergent on the positive side because we have a low here, a lower low here, but momentum is higher. And so that is a distinct point for us to consider as we stare down this chart. My thought is deep dips going to be buy zones, just like yesterday. The dip could be deeper, and big spikes should be sell zones. Where is the last big spike? Well, it's way up here at 43,000. Not really sure we get there, but 43,580. But we very well could get to 43,000. So pullbacks, buy zones. Let's take a look at the 1 hour chart here, see how it looks. Right? It's in the middle of its first pullback. Look at the slope, right? Slopes are upward, momentum drifting. That means they're looking for support. The next liquidity line below the current one where we're sitting at, 42,590. The next line below that is 42,465. What I've done here, you can see the Fibonacci's. I have come around and made a box around this opening hour, and you can see we're right in the midst of it. Wait to the bottom of it, and then see if you want to strike. The bottom of that is around 42,541. We'll see what goes from there. I like the deeper dips to buy. I have not been trading the YM lately, waiting for it to come down into a deep zone. I missed the buy yesterday, just was not paying attention in the pre-market, which is really annoying, but nevertheless, the market's a buffet, right? Open every day, just got to look for what you want to eat. Let's take a look at oil. Oil in this upward draft, we think it's going to 80.16. Right here at opening resistance areas, trying to hold 78.29 as support. Let's clone this range, see what we get. 84 potentially. But is this a little overheated? Well, it could be. Momentum's very high, but that could go for a while. My suspicion is that it's a little overheated, but we'll see. Pullbacks into 76.50 all the way to 74.22 look like great buying opportunities. I'm a little cautious about just buying this long and watching it break, but if you go to the hourly chart, you can see what we're sitting in is a very solid range from the prior resistance of yesterday to current support today. So if you want to draw a box around that and then say to yourself, I think I'm going to take this long right here, you can just notice what's been happening to the other longs lately. They've only been rising into resistance and then rotating over. So if you do take a long way down here at the 78 area, that's not too far from where price is. Just remember 78.74 is going to give you maybe a little bit of trouble. Now, that's a ton of money to be made in oil, but be careful here, right? We've got negative to flat momentum, and we definitely have got ourselves a sideways formation here in this chart. I would say, either wait for this to look better and have the moving averages turn in your favor rather than just jumping right in. It could be very volatile, especially with the PPI coming out in about, 10 minutes. Let's take a look at gold. 2740 remains resistance, right? Look at how many times resistance way from over here broke out to 2795 and then collapsed. 2740 remains resistance. Now, it collapsed from 2740 straight through 2700. I mean, it didn't stop there very long at all. And now we've come back into heavy congestion. My suspicion is that we continue to the bottom of this channel, and that channel event comes down to 2609. That's going to be a pretty nice buy zone in my mind. Now, here's the thing. If we come in here at 2609 and we buy it, and it collapses, maybe 2595, probably ought to trim gains or get out of the trade, right? Because this low volume area near 2500 feels like a magnet right now. And yesterday we had a really big selling candle. We'll have to see what happens there. Could be a buying event, but hard to say. Now, here we are in the 1 hour chart. You can see the drift. Look at momentum, down. Look at trend, down. So we know the sellers are sitting here at 2690-ish. If all of a sudden they come here and break out, that's going to be a change of temperament. Watch for that. Otherwise, we're going to grind our way down. You can see we're sitting right on top of the point of control and the VWAP. This is very noisy. Wait for a sharp collapse in price to potentially buy, or a big spike that pulls back and holds to potentially buy. You could sell it up here at the 26.89. That would be a very cheap short, because if it breaks through that area, it's going back up. It is definitely going back up. All right, let's take a look at SPY. SPY performed really well yesterday. Take a look at this daily chart. Very nicely up and around. Solid fade, fills this gap, comes right into old resistance at 565, new support, support lost and recovered. Could we do the same thing here again? Chop around and then move? Or are we headed to the bottom of the value area? It's hard to say. Keltner band, sideways to slightly down. Moving averages, slightly down, sideways. Momentum, meandering south. This to me, big spikes are shorts. Really savage fades into prior daily support are going to be longs. And that's my thought there. All right. Right now, we gapped up and now are coming back into the day. We'll see what happens. Let's take a look at the hourly chart. We can see the rise of prices into, could be an inverted head and shoulders pattern. If you're dying to go long, 578 looks like a great number. You can see momentum turning over. Downward sloping VWAP, downward sloping tight moving average, up to flat, bigger moving average, and the volatility is widening. I'm going in two different directions from my Keltner. And when that happens, it usually means bigger motion on the horizon, which is why I like the idea of waiting on the bottom or waiting on the top. All right, the top being, 588, 587, and the bottom being this 575. Just let it get there and see how it behaves rather than just putting a limit order out there. You want to see traders participating in the motion to move forward. Okay, here we go. Lastly, the Qs coming back, old resistance, breaks resistance, becomes support, loses that support, becomes support again, and then here, holds support. But yesterday, it collapsed into heavy congestion. So I'm going to move this big line down into the heavy congestion spot, and that number is 497. Okay? Momentum is momentum is down, sort of, right? Down to flat, down-ish. Moving averages, flat-ish. Still making lower highs and lower lows, however. If we go to the 1 hour chart, what we can see is the pullback into deeper support. And that's where these buy zones might sit, to be honest. I would let it come in. This is value area low. Just wait for it to come in there. See if it collapses. Notice, moving average, tight moving average down. VWAP down. Big moving average flat. Keltner band flat with expanding volatility because the upside is going up, the downside is going down. Momentum negative. So they are looking for a deeper fade to the south. Okay? That's what they're looking for. And so we just need to wait it out and see how those bands come in. Somewhere around 500 would be great if it came in and sat there all day. But it might be 501. PPI on the horizon. Take care, everyone. Know it's a little longer, but I'm trying to build good summaries, and my dictation app is helping me with that. All right, take care. I'll see you on the streams.